2 races. That's all it took for Formula One teams to go from silent to launching an official protest. Back-to-back 1-2 finishes. Up to half a second faster in key sectors. 0 reliability issues for Mercedes, while other teams using the same engine are failing before the race even begins. That's not normal. That's not just dominance. That's something the FIA is now being forced to investigate. So here's the real question. What did Mercedes find that nobody else can copy? Stay until the end, because one hidden detail behind this protest could change the entire championship. Subscribe now, because this is only getting more serious. At first, nobody called it anger. Because in Formula One, frustration doesn't show immediately. It builds. Quietly. Behind closed doors. Inside engineering rooms. Inside data sheets. Because after Australia, teams were already looking. Not at the result. At the numbers. Sector times. Energy deployment. Top speed traces. And something didn't match. Mercedes wasn't just faster. They were consistently faster, in the same places. Long straights. Power zones. Exit phases where energy deployment matters most. And the gap wasn't random. It was controlled. Repeatable. Every lap. And that's what made engineers uncomfortable. Because random speed, you can explain. Repeatable speed means something deeper. But still, no one reacted publicly. Because one race means nothing. You wait. You collect more data. You confirm the pattern. And then China happened. And everything accelerated. Because now, it wasn't just visible. It was undeniable. Another one too. Even stronger pace. Even more control. And this is where the first real tension appeared. Because Mercedes didn't just win again. They made it look easy. No degradation. No drop in performance. No moment where the car looked vulnerable. Just constant, controlled speed. And that's when teams stopped asking if Mercedes was fast. And started asking why. But here's where it gets even more serious. Because the questions didn't come from one team. They came from everywhere. Ferrari started digging deeper. Honda engineers began comparing models. Audi, analyzing quietly. And even teams using Mercedes engines started to feel something was wrong. Because they were seeing a completely different reality. Same power unit. Same regulations. But no same performance. Some struggled to extract pace. Others didn't even finish races. And that contradiction, that gap between dominance and failure, is what changed everything. Because now, it wasn't just about losing. It was about not understanding what you're losing to. And that's the most dangerous position in Formula One. Because you can't fix what you don't understand. You can't catch something you can't explain. And right now, Mercedes is becoming exactly that. Unexplainable. And when multiple teams reach that same conclusion, at the same time, that's when frustration turns into something else. Something official. Because at that point, you don't keep the conversation inside the garage anymore. You take it to the FIA. And that's exactly what they did. Not with emotion. Not with accusations. But with pressure. Because something doesn't feel right. And when enough teams say that together, it becomes impossible to ignore. But this is just the surface. Because what they are actually asking the FIA to look at is far more specific than most people realize. And once you see that detail, you understand why the situation is escalating so fast. And this is where the protests stop being general and become surgical. Because teams are no longer asking broad questions. They're pointing at one specific area. One detail that could explain everything. How the engine is measured. Not what it is. Not how it looks. How it behaves when it actually matters. Because right now, the FIA tests power units in controlled conditions. Stable temperatures. Predictable environments. Everything designed to ensure fairness. But Formula One doesn't happen there. It happens on track. At full speed. Under extreme heat. Under constant stress. And that difference might be the entire story. Because what several teams now believe is that Mercedes has found a way to unlock extra performance, only in real racing conditions. Not during inspection. Not during standard checks. Only when the engine reaches its true operating window. And if that's true, then the FIA might be looking in the wrong place. That's the core of the protest. Because imagine this. An engine that passes every test. Fits perfectly within the rules. But once it's pushed to the limit, once temperatures rise, once materials expand, it behaves differently. More efficient. More powerful. More consistent. Just enough to create a gap. Not a huge one. But in Formula One, a few tenths is everything. And that's exactly the gap we've been seeing. Especially in pure power sections. Especially when Mercedes decides to push. And suddenly, the dominance makes sense. Because it's not just about peak power. It's about when that power is available. How long it lasts. How often it can be used. Lap after lap, without penalty. While others start to fade. Start to manage. Start to compromise. And Mercedes doesn't. But here's where the situation becomes even more complex. Because this is almost impossible to prove directly. You can't fully replicate race conditions in a static test. You can't perfectly measure what happens inside an engine, at maximum stress, in real time. And that's exactly why teams are pushing the FIA. Not to accuse. To adapt. To change how things are verified. Because if the measurement is incomplete, then the regulation is incomplete. And that's a dangerous place for Formula One. Because now, the FIA has to decide. Do they introduce new ways to monitor engines? Do they measure under real conditions? Do they close this potential window? Or do they keep everything as it is, and trust the current system? And neither option is simple. Because if they change it, they risk reshaping the competitive order overnight. If they don't, they risk allowing an advantage that no one else can reach. And that's why this protest matters so much. Because it's not just about Mercedes. It's about the integrity of the system itself. And here's the twist. Even if the FIA acts, even if they close this gray area, there's still something they cannot regulate. Something even more powerful. Understanding. Because Mercedes doesn't just look faster. They look certain. Every lap. Every deployment. Every decision. There is no hesitation. No experimentation. Just execution. And that suggests something deeper. Something no test can measure. They don't just have performance. They understand exactly how to use it. And that might be the real advantage. The one no protest can remove. The one no rule can erase. So now the situation becomes even more intense. Because the FIA is not just investigating a team. They are facing a possibility. That the gap is not just technical. It's intellectual. And if that's true, then even if the rules change, Mercedes might still be ahead. Which leads to one final question. If the problem isn't just what Mercedes built, but what they understand, how do you ever catch them? And this is where the entire situation becomes uncomfortable for everyone involved. Because up to this point, you could still believe this was fixable. A technical gap. A measurement issue. Something the FIA could step in, adjust, and solve. That's what the protests are built on. That idea. That hope. But what if that's not enough? Because the deeper teams look, the more they start to realize something unsettling. This advantage isn't coming from one single trick. It's coming from how everything works together. Because think about what we've seen so far. Mercedes doesn't just have better straight-line speed. They don't just deploy energy better. They don't just avoid reliability issues. They do all of it at the same time. Perfectly. Race after race. And that's not a coincidence. That's integration. Because in this new era, the power unit is not separate from the car. It's part of a complete system. Engine, battery, software, cooling, aerodynamics. Everything connected. Everything influencing everything else. And this is where Mercedes has done something the others haven't. They didn't just build a strong engine. They built the entire package around it. From the beginning. While others are still adapting. Still adjusting. Still trying to make different pieces work together. And that difference is massive. Because when your entire system is designed as one, you don't fight limitations. You control them. You know exactly how far you can push. Exactly when to push. And exactly when to hold back. And that's what we're seeing on track. Control. Total control. While others are still searching for it. But here's the part that makes this even more serious. Because this kind of advantage doesn't disappear quickly. You can copy parts. You can analyze data. You can even change regulations. But you cannot instantly replicate understanding. You cannot shortcut experience. And you cannot rebuild integration overnight. That takes time. Races. Failures. And by the time you get there, the team ahead has already moved forward again. And that's exactly why teams are furious. Because deep down, they're starting to realize something they didn't want to admit this early in the season. This might not be a short-term problem. This might be the beginning of a cycle. A cycle where one team controls the pace of development, controls the direction of the grid, controls how everyone else reacts. And if that happens, then the protests, the pressure, the investigation, all of it, might only slow Mercedes down, not stop them. And that's the real fear inside the paddock right now. Not just that Mercedes is ahead, but that they're ahead in a way that's very hard to catch. So now everything comes down to one moment, one decision, from the FIA. Do they intervene hard enough to break that cycle before it grows? Or do they hold back and risk watching the same story repeat, race after race, until the championship is no longer a question, but an inevitability? Because right now, after Australia, after China, there is one thought, quietly spreading across the entire grid. What if this season was decided before it even began? And this is the moment where everything stops being theory. Because now, the entire grid is watching the same thing unfold. Not just results, reactions. Because after Australia, there were questions. After China, there is pressure. And after this protest, there will be consequences. One way or another. Because the FIA cannot ignore this level of tension. Too many teams. Too many concerns. Too much at stake. And that's what makes the next race so important. Not just for points. For answers. Because everyone will be looking for signs. Small ones. Subtle ones. Does Mercedes still have that same straight line advantage? Do they still pull away in the same sectors? Do they still show zero drop-off, lap after lap? Or does something change? Because even the smallest change would mean something. It would mean the pressure is working. It would mean adjustments are being made. Quietly. Behind the scenes. And in Formula One, those silent changes are often the most important ones. But if nothing changes, if Mercedes arrives at the next race and delivers the exact same dominance, then the message becomes clear. This isn't temporary. This isn't situational. This is structural. And that's when the real panic begins. Because at that point, teams are no longer chasing performance. They're chasing understanding. And that's a much harder race to win. Because you can develop upgrades. You can bring new parts. You can improve setups. But understanding takes time. And time is exactly what they don't have. Because every race Mercedes wins is not just points gained. It's pressure increased. It's momentum building. It's confidence growing. And confidence in Formula One is dangerous. Because once a team knows they have control, they become even more aggressive, even more precise, even more difficult to beat. And that's exactly the trajectory we're seeing. But here's the final layer. The one that truly defines this moment. Because beyond the FIA, beyond the protests, beyond the technical debate, there is something even more decisive. Psychology. Because right now, there is one team that believes they cannot lose, and 9 others starting to wonder if they can win. And that shift, that invisible shift, changes everything. It changes strategy. It changes risk. It changes how drivers push, how teams react under pressure. Because when you believe you're behind, you take more risks. You force more performance. You make more mistakes. And when you believe you're ahead, you control everything. And that's exactly what Mercedes is doing. Controlling the pace. Controlling the races. And now, possibly controlling the direction of the entire season. So as we move forward, the real question is no longer technical. It's psychological. Can the rest of the grid recover belief before Mercedes turns this advantage into something untouchable? Because if they don't, then this protest, this moment, this pressure on the FIA will not be remembered as the turning point. It will be remembered as the warning that everyone saw, but no one could stop.